You're listening to Bigfoot Society, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. Tonight's story comes from a man who's been tracking Sasquatch for over 5 decades, from the misty woods of Washington to the hidden corners of California. But these aren't just sightings from a researcher. They're firsthand accounts of encounters so intense, they'll make you question everything you thought you knew about the forest. So get ready for rock-throwing Sasquatch, shadowy figures, and some of the most mysterious events you'll ever hear. And this is a story of Mr. T, a Bigfoot investigator. So stay with us. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to Mr. T today. Mr. T is a Bigfoot researcher. He's been on the west coast of the United States, looking around in different areas since about 1974. So we are looking at roughly about 50 years of Bigfoot that'll be discussed today. So welcome to the show, Mr. T. How's it going?
It's going great.
Oh, man, we were talking a little bit before, and it's going to be a really, really interesting one. We'll be going to some cool places with this one. But, you know, Mr. T, when I talk to an individual that has so much background as yourself, I would love us to start real quick. If you could, you know, let us know what is it that got you into the Bigfoot field to begin with.
Well, like everybody else, just watching the TV shows with Leonard Nimoy back in the day. And, you know, it just kind of seemed like something interesting. So just started looking into it, and I got, of course, the Patterson Gimlin film wasn't showed a whole lot on TV back in the 70s. So I decided to go into the library and do some research at the Seattle Library, and there wasn't much information. There was only like 2 or 3 books. And so I was looking through the books, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And of course, all the original guys that were researching it, you know, there's some pretty credible guys. I mean, anthropologists, and of course, it all started from the Yeti over in the Himalayas. So I kind of just started doing research, and then I was just like, the books ended. I was like, what is going on? Why was there be no more information on this in the library? I actually went through looking through newspapers on those flash drives they have to be able to look up old stories, and just everything ended about in the 80s. I was like, what is going on? It was almost, in my opinion, like they were protecting it, that they figured out it was the real deal. And they were like, hey, either we shut this down now, or people are going to go and start hunting this thing and killing it. And we have to protect it. And most people that don't know this, Washington State has been protecting Bigfoot in the Skamania County. They have a law that if you shoot a Bigfoot, they will arrest you and give you, you know, a huge fine. So I was looking into that, and I was like, man, I never really knew about that. But I grew up in Washington State in the North Seattle area. And so I had always been wondering about these stories. And so I went into looking more into it and found out that they do exist, and the government protects them. And there is a map that they also made from the Corps of Engineers stating that there was Bigfoot. And then they covered up that whole thing and took it off the Corps of Engineers, state of Washington. And that was like in the 70s or 80s. I can't remember, but do you remember anything like that?
Yeah, so I've actually found that document that you're referring to. I'll put a link to it in the show notes for this one, but it's wild when you read it. I mean, like, they really get into it. So yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so that was kind of the start of it, and then I just kind of went from there. And then in 1974, we decided to go over camping in the Olympic Rainforest, and we got over there. We set up tent and camp on this river, and we hiked in about an hour. And if you've never been to the Olympic Rainforest, I mean, I always tell the people in Southern California, they're like, what? This place exists? I'm like, yes. The moss hangs 100 feet down from the top of the tree, and all the logs on the trail are covered in moss. So it's like you're in a prehistoric world almost. And you hike in there, you're just like blown away. It's like you've gone back in time. And so we set up our camp and we fell asleep, and we woke up and one of the guys jumped out of the tent. There was like 4 of us, my older brother and a couple of friends. And he jumps out of the tent and says, "Baby moose, there's a baby moose." And so we're like, okay, what the heck? Let's get out of here. So we didn't really have any things going on that night, but we decided to just start hiking around. And of course, we had not heard much about Bigfoot at that point in 74. So we started hiking around, and then we hiked up this mountain towards the end of the day, and we hiked straight up. I mean, I'm talking like by the end, we hiked for like close to an hour, and we're just pulling on roots, and it became so steep we really couldn't go any further. And then all of a sudden we hear this huge snort behind us, like, whoa, and we were just like, what was that? And a branch snapped, and I thought, oh, that's got to be an elk. What could be up here to make a snort like that? But you could clearly hear it. I mean, it was like, so that was my first, occurrence of something that I wasn't sure what it was. I don't know if it was Bigfoot, but it just seems weird that anything else up at that level would be, an elk up at that height. And to have a tree snap and a loud snort like it was catching its breath, it was like something was tracking us going up there. There was no other occurrence.
Sorry, was that in an area that's known for documented sightings as well?
Yeah, later I found out that, that whole Olympic Rainforest is, very, a lot of stories in there. I mean, there's stories of loggers in the 1930s that had logged areas in there. And I don't know if you've ever heard these stories, but it goes back to old Washington State loggers in the 1930s, and they were having a lot of their equipment damaged and stolen. And they were like, what is going on here? So they put in guards, and they hired guards and put them on the perimeter of the thing, and it kept happening. And they were putting armed loggers with guns on the perimeter of these logging camps. And a few of the guys disappeared, and they sent in people to look for them and never found them. And that whole story's been covered up. So there's something going on up there. And then there's other sightings of police officers. I used to go to La Push and hike up in there. There's some great coastal areas. Just it's amazing. The whole place is like you're going back in time. If you ever hike up in there, you'll just be blown away. The Coast Highway is one of the best in the world. I mean, they have some of the top beaches ranked in the world in the top 10, and they're known to go around the beaches as well to get kelp and other things. So that was a very strange thing, that Olympic Rainforest and what happened to us. Later, we went hiking up into the rainforest in the 80s. We decided, because you could see the Olympic Mountains from North Seattle, where we lived, from Puget Sound. It was great sunsets, and we'd always dream about hiking up in there. So when you're the same people that I went with in 74, we said, hey, let's go over there and hike up to that top peak, which is called the Brothers. And it kind of looks like a volcano, but it's one mountain in front of another. And so we're like, hey, let's go up there. We'll have this great hike, and we'll go up there and watch 4th of July from there. And we thought it would be these great fireworks we'd be able to see. So we went up there, and we hiked up, parked our car, and we hiked up this windy trail that went, for hours. We hiked and came to a lake that was up there. And we took a break there, and then we hiked up further through the shale rock and got literally on top of the mountain, almost to the top. It was crazy. It goes up to like 8,000 feet. And so we set up our tent. We were looking around, and we see all these mountain goats. And we're like, man, those things are like the best hikers in the world. And apparently the mountain goats were all brought over there in the early years from Europe, and they put them there to live and migrate. So we crashed out. We thought we saw some UFOs that night because it was so clear. And then earlier, before we went to bed, we had seen these mountain goats able to crawl down the steepest shale rock that you've ever seen. You're like, how can they get down here? And we look back up and they're on their elbows, and they're going slowly on their elbows. And we're thinking, man, this is crazy. So later that night, we had heard some loud footsteps around this tent. And we thought it was the mountain goats. We don't know for sure what it was because we were too scared to even look out of the tent. But it sounded like somebody was walking around. And it sure wasn't a goat or a hoof. So we woke up and got out of there. And it was scary because we didn't know what it was. And I'm convinced they're up in that area. And definitely every story you hear out of there, they're now talking about that area as totally Sasquatch related.
About the brothers specifically?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that whole area. From what I've done my research, I found out that they like to stay in the higher elevations because that way nobody bothers them. And when they come down into the lower areas, if people are camping or they're curious, they want to check you out. It's almost like they're special forces. They're flanking you. There's more than one, and they're always in threes or fours, and they maneuver and they talk to each other. And the wood knocks is part of their communication that I've figured out. And they're slowly moving to check you out because they're curious. And the Indians even spoke about this. They would all tell you, if you do research on the Northwest Indians and the ones up in British Columbia, they all say they stay out of the higher ground. They don't go up there. That's their world. And they teach their young the same thing. Don't go up into the higher areas. So people that are hiking up there and think they're going to find some secret areas that they want to go camp and have a great time. The North Cascades, I've been up in there. That place is definitely, no human is up there. They close the North Cascades Highway during the wintertime, and they don't let anybody in there anyways. So I know they're up in there, and they're all over Washington State. The most sightings with Bigfoot is in the Washington State and Northern California. So my brother also used to run trails near Monte Cristo. And Monte Cristo is located in northern Washington on the west side. And he used to run these trails back in the 80s, in the early 80s. And he would always say, hey, man, I feel like something's watching me. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, it freaks me out. I get up in there. And he used to be in incredible shape. The guy could run these trails. There was another trail he'd run called Wallace Falls. And, man, it's like a 3-mile run. You're like running through steep terrain and up a trail and back down. And so he would do this Monte Cristo trail like once a week. And he's like, hey, there's these creatures I feel like I'm being watched. And he says, I think it's Bigfoot. And I said, why would you say that? And he goes, because I've talked to some locals, and this one guy told me that he said that the people that live up there protect it, and they don't tell people about it because they know they're there and they just don't bother anybody, so they leave them alone. So that was kind of crazy. And our brother would always tell us about that. We were like, really? So I did that trail once with him, and I kind of felt weird, like somebody was watching me. And then we got the heck out of there. But
I need to clarify something real quick, because there's going to be listeners that are going to have a question, because there's multiple places. I'll ask it this way. This Monte Cristo trail, is this in Skamania County, or is it further north in Washington?
It's further north.
Okay.
It's north of Snohomish.
Got it. Okay, so that's the one we're looking at. All right. I was thinking of, there's a place by Trout Lake that is also called Monte Cristo. So.
Yeah, it's been so long, but I'm pretty sure it's up past Snohomish area.
Yep. I'm seeing it now. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, and then, there was also a story that I tell people, and it was really bizarre because it was later on the news and they covered up the whole thing, and you still can't find the story. I've Googled around trying to find it. You cannot find it. And it's the Puyallup trailer park story of a wild man that went through there smashing up all the trailers, and then it ran out of there and they called the cops. So I had this guy working with us at this restaurant we used to own in North Seattle, and he was a dishwasher, and we all partied together. So we went down and stayed at his place, and he had this trailer in this trailer park. And later that night, we had heard all this loud noise. It almost sounded like a car crash. It was crazy. And we're just like, what the heck is going on? It wasn't right next to his, because there was a lot of trailers in there. They were in rows. And so it was super loud. And so we just thought nothing of it. So we woke up, and I ended up leaving because I had to be back in North Seattle for an appointment. And he tells me that the cops showed up. There was smash marks that no human could put in these trailers. I'm talking, they were like at 10 feet tall, like the height of a basketball, where it just went running through there, smashing both sides of the trailers. You know how they're like connected within rows. He was so they thought it was some guy on, I don't know, but back in the 80s, they had this drug called PCP. Cops would try to arrest these guys. They would take on 3 cops. And so everybody thought it was the guy on PCP that was some hippie, because the hippies were still around in the early 80s. And he went through the trailer, and he was some hippie living up in the woods, and he smashed up all these trailers. And so that's what everybody thought it was. But lo and behold, they called the cops. The cop came, and apparently that night we had heard later that the cop drove outside there. There was a road that left up outside of the park area, trailer park, and shined his light on this creature, and it was running up the road and then disappeared off this bank down into the woods. And that was on the news, and it was on King 5, I believe it was King 5 News. And the story of this trailer park getting smashed up, there was fist hole marks in all of these trailers like you couldn't believe when they went and documented it later. And the story has since was gone. And then I've never heard of it since. But I know that it happened because I was there. I didn't see any of the smash marks, but because I left. But the kid came back to work the next day and was like, you wouldn't believe what that trailer park looked like. Some of them were moved off their foundations, apparently, because they're not that big. They're like double wides. And they were like, there's no way that a human could have done this. So then they covered up the whole story because, it was figured it wasn't a wild man on drugs. It was the Bigfoot. So that was a crazy story. Did you ever hear about that?
I'm trying to think right now. I don't think I've ever heard about that. What year? You said 80s, right?
It was early 80s.
Okay. Yeah, no, I haven't heard of it.
Like 82. And then I had some other guys I worked with, and I would just like, I hadn't had very many encounters myself that I had seen anything except other than, you know, someone walking around our tent, up in the, you know, it was crazy up in the mountains. So later there was these guys I worked with, and I was asking them about it. They were younger kids. They were younger than me. I would say at that time I was in my 30s, and I was asking these younger guys that were working with me, and I said, hey, have you know, because they told me where they lived, and one lived up past Snohomish, towards Arlington, which is pretty much out in the boonies. And have you, had any sightings? And he says, funny you asked me that, because we were relaxing and having a drink after work. And he was like, nobody's ever asked me that. And so I knew he was telling me the truth. And he says he was coming from a party where the road, I think it was Highway 9, was closed down. They close it during the winter time. It's up north of Snohomish, up towards Arlington. And he was coming, they had just opened the road. It was springtime. And he was coming down the road by himself after the party at like 5 or 6 in the morning, right when the sun came up. And he says he's approaching this thing that looks like a bear on the side of the road. And he slows down and he sees this thing, and all of a sudden it stands up. He says it's like 8 feet tall, and it's all covered in hair. And he's just like dumbfounded, doesn't even know what to think. He says as he gets within like 30 yards of the thing, it leaps across the road he said it leapt across the 2-lane highway in 2 steps, and then up this embankment that was like 30, 40 feet up at about a 40-degree angle. He said the thing jumped into that embankment and grabbed a couple of tree bushes or whatever and pulled himself and gone. And he says, I've never told anybody that story because I knew everybody would think I was crazy. I said, dude, that, once he told me the whole story, I was just like, there's no way that was a person. And then there was another guy that I worked with, and he had a sighting at, I was asking him, you ever had any sightings? He said, yeah, as a matter of fact, when I was a kid, I was at Mount Rainier, and we were camping out, and I went down to the stream by myself, and it was like dusk, and he said he looked down the stream, and there was this creature bent over drinking water, and he didn't know what it was. He thought it was a bear at first, and he said that it stood up, and it was like 8 feet tall. It looked at him, and it just walked away into the bushes. And I was like, man, that must have been scary. So there's always these people, it's best to just ask them, and you can tell if they're lying or not. And those are pretty credible stories for me from just people I met along the way. But that Puyallup thing, I mean, I've tried researching it, and I still cannot find anybody. I've talked to a few people, and a few people had heard about that, and they're like, yeah, I remember that. So I know it happened.
It'll be interesting to hear if anyone listening also remembers that as well. But Mr. T, it sounds like, did most of your research take place in Washington State then?
Yeah. And then in the year 1999, I moved down to San Diego area, and then started doing some trips up into the, Redwoods, and California is an amazing state. I mean, it's just like 3 states combined, and it has everything. So as much as people want to talk trash about it, I always say, man, get up in there, because there's 60,000 square miles. There's 60,000 square miles. When people say, oh, it's all a myth, I go, dude, we were in wagons, literally in wagons 120 years ago. None of those roads were even built when they built the logging roads was basically in the 30s and 40s and 50s to even get into those areas. And the ancient Indians are not making up stories. They're telling you what they saw. And they told their kids not to go into those areas. Even the higher up Indian chiefs and everyone told even the hunters to stay in their lane and not piss these things off, because if you make them upset, you're going to pay the price. So I started doing some research into the Bigfoot a little bit more when I was in California, and I was like, they've got to be up in here. And back to the 60,000 square miles of untracked territory that never hears the voice of man. That is from British Columbia all the way to Northern California, Washington, Oregon, Northern California, all the way down to San Diego. There's actually a Cleveland National Forest that runs all the way to San Diego. And so I'll get into some sightings that have been happening and have happened in San Diego. And the main one is a story told by a psychologist that worked at San Diego State, and he lived in Alpine, which is about 40 miles from my house, because I live in East San Diego. So in the mountains, it's very mountainous. People think, oh, San Diego doesn't have any mountains. I said, what are you talking about? That's why I moved here. There's mountains starting from the ocean at the beaches all the way 50, 60 miles inland. It snows 60 miles inland up in the mountains. It goes up to 6,000 feet. And so I always tell my Washingtonian friends, snow quality only goes up to about 3 to 3,500 square, above sea level. Maybe 4,000 you might get at certain higher levels in the up north. And so it's very mountainous here. And there is stories that I've researched in San Diego. And it's the story called the Zoobies. And the reason he called them the Zoobies is because the police officer that interviewed him thought that's what he said. So the guy was very credible. He was like I said, a psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever, at the San Diego State University. He had a couple kids. He bought this property way up in the boonies, about 30, 40 miles outside San Diego, in the mountains, near the Indian reservation, Viejas. And he claims these things were picking apples off his trees. So he called the cop. The cop was a former San Diego police officer that took a job up there as a security cop for that area. So he was called in to check on the whole story. And he has documented what he said. And there was 2 adults and 2 juveniles picking apples. The guy freaked out. He bought a gun, never owned a gun, and actually feared for his life. I mean, he just didn't know what was going on. What are these things? And so that story has been documented. And then there was another story about a kid that was playing hide and go seek up there and wrote and documented the story. And he was only about 13 at the time. And he claims he was hiding from his friends in the same area. And it's right at the end of the Cleveland National Forest. It actually ends right on Highway 8 as you come out of San Diego. That Cleveland National Forest goes all the way up into the Sequoias and Yosemite. It's the same deal, but it's narrower. It comes all the way into San Diego. Even my brother, when he was moved here, he's like, I can't believe there's a forest up here. It's crazy. I go, yeah, because San Diego is kind of like a coastal desert. And so when you go up into these mountains, you're kind of blown away. And I've always felt a presence up there up there of Bigfoot. And there's been stories of wood knocks and other things up there as well, which we'll get into in a minute. But anyway, the story with the psychiatrist and the Zoobies and the kid was playing hide and go seek. He claims that this Bigfoot, right at dusk, came and literally faced him where he was hiding and screamed so loud that it like shook the kid to pieces. And the kid was in shock for like 2 days because this thing screamed at him. And he documented that. And most people have never heard that story, but that is another great one. And so I started like hiking around up there, and I ride motorcycles up there and I also have a sports car that I would drive up there with the top down. And I'd always like get up in there and I'd always feel some type of presence. And I'm like, yeah, they're up here for sure. And then there's also been some stories of people that have camped up in that area, which is Mount Laguna. And then Mount Laguna goes up to Julian, and there's many sightings in Julian. There's actually a story of an area that you have to hike to about 45 minutes, and there's a Bigfoot print that is in the rock. So look that up, because that's true, and it's been documented that there is a footprint that is more than 1,000 years old, and it's into the bedrock.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
That's
so
really
that
intense. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's intense. And believe me, I've been to a lot of places. I've not hiked up to that spot. I'm thinking about it, but it's a ways away. It's like an hour outside of Julian, up in the mountain. And there's been reports of the creature through people that lived up there that have been covered up, and they don't talk about much. And people think, oh, maybe it's gone out of here but no, there's families that live on, and most of them, in my opinion, have migrated out of certain areas to more denser population to feel safer, because as population moves in, they kind of move out. And like I told you before, we were in wagons 120 years ago, and nobody went in there unless they went in by wagon. And even going into the sequoias where the giant trees are, those trees are only in that area. They're nowhere else in the world, and they're the age of Christ. They're 2,000 years old. They're 40, 50 feet in circumference, 300 feet high. I mean, you go in there and you're like in a whole nother world. So anybody that hasn't been up there, I know they're up in there too, but they don't hang around where tourists are. They're pretty much trying to move out. Like I said, some of their migrating families have stayed in certain areas because that's where they feel comfortable. And in the certain parts of these eastern mountains of San Diego, there's a lot of pockets where nobody ever goes. And if you go up to Mount Laguna, there's plenty of room up there. Now I'm going to get to a story about if you go past Julian, so it's Mount Laguna up into Julian. It's the greatest motorcycle ride on the planet. And it runs 175 miles nonstop, no light. I mean, no stop signs, no nothing. And you just go from mountain to mountain. So it's Mount Laguna, Julian, and then you go through Santa Isabel. And then there's a back road on Santa Isabel that runs, it's called Masa Grande, something like that. And it runs through these farms, and it's like literally 8 miles until you come around to this biker bar, and it's called the Hideout. And then there's Lake Henshaw. Now, every time I've gone through this secret road that kind of some guy turned me onto it years ago, motorcycle riding, I met him at the gas station. He's like, yeah, there's this like back road. It's like you're driving through Ireland. I'm like, yeah, I got to check that out. So every time I've gone through there, I get this weird presence that there's something there, like a Bigfoot. And I'm like, this is a perfect area for him to hang out. And so when I went up in there, I'd had that feeling several times. There's wild turkeys up in there. There's deer, there's cows running around. It's crazy. And then you come out and you're down at the bottom. It's all windy. It goes down this hill, steep grade, windy road all the way down to the lake. And then there's that biker bar in Lake Henshaw. Well, there's this guy that you have to check out, and he's on YouTube, and his story is of the Bigfoot that come around his property. He doesn't live there, but his dad owned it, and they had a trailer on there, I think. And that he had been going there since he's a kid, but he still goes up there and parties with his friends. And he's on this show that I'm looking up here. And he has a property. It's called Mysteries and Monsters at the Border. So look that up on YouTube. It's called Mysteries and Monsters at the Border. This guy is in the same area where I've done the motorcycle ride at least 100 times over the last 20 years. I'm telling you, I had a feeling there's something in there. So I'm watching this, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to Google around and see about Bigfoots in San Diego, which seems kind of unlikely, but there was all these stories. And here this guy has a story on that show, Mysteries and Monsters at the Border, and it has several different stories on there about the Border Patrol that's seen them, and ones that are in the desert because they're obviously migrating. Why are they in the desert? Because they're migrating back and forth. They're not sitting in the same place. They're moving, following the food. So Lake Henshaw, near that biker bar, is where they apparently have had a lot of sightings. And this guy has a video of the creature. It's kind of dark, but it sure as heck looks like one. Like, you know, ones I've seen on other videos. And it comes up on his property, and there's 2 or 3 of them. And he tells the whole story, how they're like around his campfire, and he spends the night there in a sleeping bag, and they're like right above him. I mean, that's creepy. And how his buddy took a video, and you can clearly see the creature in the video. So you got to watch it. It's awesome. And I was just blown away because I'm like, that's exactly where I had that feeling. And I don't know exactly where his property is. Otherwise, I'd go knock on his door and say, hey, let me check this out. But it's kind of a hidden property. And he says they mimic cows and owls, which they're very known for. And so even in his video, he goes, listen, dude, that's not a cow. There's somebody making that noise. And when they come at night, when he goes up there with his friends, because he's not there all the time, they go up, they have a camp ring and a bunch of chairs, and it's like a little party zone for him. And I'm telling you, it's credible. There's something up there. And that whole Lake Henshaw has, in the middle of the lake, there's an area called Monkey Island. And he was making fun of that, you know, Monkey Island, it must have been because of the Bigfoot monkey. But in reality, they possibly named that because there were some monks that went up into that area back in the later early 1900s, I don't know, whenever, when they had all the missions they were building up and down the West Coast with the friars. Okay, so then I'm thinking about, so then I'm like researching about that, and I'm thinking, well, this Palomar, I've camped up there, and there's been some weird occurrences up there. There's been some sightings and stories of people that have camped and heard somebody running through their campground, loud thuds. And then I found out, so this is where, if you go past, so once you get to Lake Henshaw, there's the east grade that runs up Palomar, and that goes up to 6,000 feet as well. Mount Laguna's at 6,000, then you come to Julian, then you go down to Lake Henshaw, up. The other mountain is 6,000 at the top of that. So in that area, there's a protected area where the telescope is, okay? And the telescope used to be the largest one in the whole world. It took them decades to even get the glass right. It's 200 square inch diameter, beveled, and polished, and that was the furthest they could see into stars back in the day. So that's called the Palomar Mountain Observatory. And then I found out there's this huge area behind the observatory that's all protected. Nobody can go in there. Why? Because I think they know that Bigfoot lives there and they protected it. And I think it's all a huge cover-up by the government. They do not want people to know about this because, number one, we won't be able to handle it. That it is part of humanity. Whenever they find the hairs, there's always comes back to human DNA, so it's a cross. It's a crossbreed of some sort, and they just don't want to let it out. And I'll get into that later. Why? Is because of religion, mostly. Okay, you want salvation? We're not talking about Bigfoot. Can't bring it up at this. They don't want that in there. So we'll get into that later. But anyway, this whole area behind Palomar Observatory is protected. Look it up yourself. It is a huge swath of land, and nobody can go in there. You cannot hike in there. If you do, they will arrest you, and I can guarantee you 100% the creature is in there and had come down into Lake Henshaw, and that guy's property. Watch that video. It'll blow your mind what is going on up there. So, pretty amazing.
Just real quick, I want to comment on the video that you've been talking about. I believe you're talking about Eli Watson's documentary series on YouTube where he talks about Bigfoot in Southern California.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really good. So I'm going to have that links. So
and that guy has been doing a lot of research. He's a young kid, but he's good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's like literally going around collecting these stories and interviewing people. Like I never got around to that, but I mean, I've done enough research for 50 years now. I'm 100% convinced it exists. Okay. And we'll get into what it is at the end here. But now we'll just go into Big Sur, where I have been going up to the motorcycle races at Laguna Seca. And it's awesome. If you've never been there, go check that out. It's phenomenal. These kids flying around the racetrack at 150, 200 miles an hour. And so we camp out up there, usually stay at a motel, and then we ride motorcycles back down the Highway 1, which is the best motorcycle ride or sightseeing road probably in the world. It goes for 60 miles. There's nobody there, and it's just like unbelievable. Big Sur is a small town. After Big Sur, there's nothing. So we drive into Big Sur. We're in a motorhome the first time that we had this rock throwing incident. We're in a motorhome, me and my brother. And it's 28 feet, Class C motorhome. We're just like having a great time. We head down out in Monterey at about 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. Starts to get dusky, and we come past in Big Sur, and it's getting around sunset. So we keep going. We're about 20 miles past Big Sur, and it starts getting, up and down. It's like 300-foot cliffs, windy roads. It's a hairy setup for an RV. So I'm like, hey, dude, we need to pull over. This is sketchy at best. I don't feel comfortable coming around these corners on 300-foot cliffs with no guardrails. So we pull over on this huge shoulder right before a big drop-off that's going down. And there's a sign that says steep grade, big yellow sign. So we stop in front of that about 20 feet. It's a pretty wide shoulder. So I'm like, perfect. We'll just hang out here, spend the night. Cop comes by, we'll just tell him we're having battery problems. We're not going anywhere. So we set up. I put some chairs out. I'm looking at the most amazing sunset from 300 feet up on this cliff. And we're in the middle of nowhere. There's no anything around there. And so I'm listening to some music, crack a beer, and enjoying the sunset. Well, my brother goes over to take a leak next to the sign that's 20 feet in front of the motorhome. Keep in mind, the sign is facing in front of us, a big triangle sign that says steep grade. So all of a sudden, this rock the size of a softball hits that sign. I'm like, what is that? My brother's like, what the? And so he just like freaks out and heads back to the motorhome. And then he won't even look at me. He's like, goes in and closes the door. I'm like, what? So I thought nothing of it. And I was just like, what was that? I didn't think Bigfoot at the time. I just thought maybe it bounced off the hill but then I was looking around and I was like, that'd be pretty impossible to bet. It's not a Super Bowl. How could it bounce off the freaking road? It's impossible. I mean, that sign is like 10 feet tall or 8 feet at least. And so I'm like, what? So I tried to go in and talk to him and the door's locked. I'm like, dude, open up, what's going on? This is insane. And he finally opens the door after I'm banging on it. He's like, somebody, I don't know that I felt like something was watching me out there. I'm like, what are you talking about? Dude, relax, have a beer. And so we relaxed and I didn't really think anything of it. It had been a while since I'd done a whole lot of Bigfoot research and I was just like, didn't even think of it. And so we crashed out, woke up and drove down out of there the next morning. And I get down to the lower area where there's like a mini state park every 5 miles. It's awesome. So we just pulled in there, made some food, and then I started thinking about it. I'm like, dude, we just had a Bigfoot. He's like, why would somebody throw a rock at us? It could have been some hippie in the woods. I'm like, no. This doesn't make any sense. So when I got home, I started doing some research and started researching that exact area. And sure enough, there was all kinds of going on up there. And these girls in the 70s had seen this guy running that cliff. If you look at it when you're there, it's literally 40, 50 degree angle. I'm an expert skier. Those are called jump turns coming down, stuff like that. You're not skiing it. You're jump turning because it's 40 to 50 degrees. And it's like she says, these two girls were on the beach looking up. There's some man running down the cliff. They're like thinking to themselves, 15-year-old girls are saying, there's no way a human could run down that. They even knew that. So that was one sighting. And then there was another sighting of somebody that saw them taking kelp out of the water, and it was a hairy creature. And then the other one, which is totally crazy, is this lady is from, it's on another one of the podcasts, but she is from England, and she's in Monterey doing pictures of creatures on the coast of Monterey. Well, you go just past Monterey where there's a little town, and it's literally like you're in no middle of nowhere. And it's like you were back in time when you get on these coast of Monterey for like 20, 30 miles, there's nothing. It's just rustic and amazing. So she drove out of there and went down about 15 miles and decided to go to the coast to take some pictures of sea lions or whatever she could find. And she's sitting on this rock with her camera. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of her eye, she sees these creatures crawling on all fours. I'm sure you've heard of Bigfoot that can like go down on all fours and literally move like a spider. It's crazy. And so she sees these 4 or 5 creatures and she's like in awe, like, what the? And so they're going to the ocean and they're getting kelp and whatever. And then she drops the camera or something because she's so freaked out, and they hear her, and the male jumps up and screams at her. She freaks out, and then they start coming towards her, and the alpha male that is massive, they're on 2 legs now coming at her. It's peeing at her, trying to scare her and get her out of there or something. And she passes out. And they end up finding her next to her car. I guess somebody went out and looked for her or something. And then when she got back into Monterey, She was so freaked out. They told the whole story, and somebody showed up like a Men in Black. Like there's these government officials that show up and told her that what she saw was a bear, and that to keep it quiet. And she went back to England with her head between her legs. Did you ever hear that story?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a minute. How far away from the area with the rock was that more or less?
Right across. So there's a 2-lane road that runs the whole way for 60 miles.
Uh-huh.
And there's a massive forest that is military or government controlled, that is like literally like 40 miles inland and like 50 miles long. I forget the name of the forest next to, as you come out of that Highway 1, it's called the Coast Highway. So the rock came from across the street, so the 2-lane road, it came out of the bushes, but it was a steep grade, 40-degree steep grade, and the rock came out of there. It was the size of a softball. It wasn't a pebble. It was perfectly aimed. And after I thought about it and hearing stories how they can throw these rocks so well, it kind of blew my mind. And then it freaked me out that it was that close. Now, we didn't have any other occurrences later that night. I did hear something sounded like it hit the RV, but I just didn't think anything of it.
Oh, wow.
So I think that we were quiet enough. And in my opinion, I think they leave you alone once you get out of their, like a lot of people in tents and stuff, you know, they don't rip your tent apart. I mean, I'm sure they have on occasions, but the majority of the time people say they're just like very curious. And if you are bothering them, you're screwed, in my opinion. And that's why a lot of these hunters disappear, because they're in there to hunt their food source. And you've heard the story about telepathy. I mean, they know what these guys are. They know what you're up to. You're a person in there, hunting and looking to do damage and take out their food source. You're going to be their food source.
No, absolutely.
And that's my opinion on that whole thing. And the people that are spiritual and kind, they're cool with you. They'll let you slide. Like I have a brother that still lives up there, and him and his friend go up to Index River, where Mount Index is, east of Seattle. It's some crazy country up in there, and they've been camping up in there for like 20 years. And they cook burgers and shoot off some fireworks, plant their American flag, and my brother still dives off the rock at 50 plus years old, 30-foot dive. And they sent me a picture of a bonfire, and I could swear that I could see a Bigfoot poking out of the woods. I've been trying to get it developed because it's kind of blurry. It's far enough away, but you can clearly see a head sticking out of the trees at about 8 feet. And then you can clearly see the shadow of the body, and everybody thinks I'm freaking crazy. I'm like, no, he's probably been. I go, dude, he's up there watching you guys. They probably like you guys. You guys are fun, diving around. They've probably never seen fireworks. They're like, these guys are cool. So that's all I can tell about that whole deal, because I told him, man, because he went up there camping by himself one time, and I'm like, dude, that's not a good idea. You can just you can get disappear real fast, because we can get into this later, but in my opinion, there's good ones and evil ones, just like human beings, right? Like there's people that just murder people for no reason because they're crazy. And that maybe there's that side of a Bigfoot that has the ones that just don't like people. I mean, they're crazy. And I don't know. I mean, the Indians talked about it. They talked about ones that were up. The most aggressive ones are up in Tahoe. I've been up into Tahoe and the above Tahoe, up in those areas north of Tahoe in those deep woods. There's some bad ones in there apparently that the Indians even talked about that took their children.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. That is something I haven't heard of. I'm sure everyone has put a comment about it already, but the episode you're referring to is Sasquatch Chronicles 515. And I know that because it's like the most famous, like everyone know it's a really good one.
this other one about on his podcast about the guy in Oregon that is digging his house, and the creatures show up and are banging on his trailer, and he's like an ex-military, and the guy comes out and shines his light on him, and they're across from where he did his 10-foot hole to put his house in the woods, and the little one is down inside the well, and they scream at him, and the guy freezes, and then he says there's ones off to his left flanking him that are like 12 feet tall. I'm like, what? Did you ever listen to that one?
So I'll be honest.
That's probably my favorite one.
I will be honest that I don't have a lot of time to consume content, honestly. But I listen to that one. I listen to confessionals sometimes, like if I'm on road trips. So I haven't listened to them all, but I do know a few of them, like the 515 California one. Definitely know that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's lots of stuff going on in the woods east of here, which is really strange. And then I recently went up last year to my friend's property in Marble Mountain, Washington. And that's so my sister lives. Yeah. So they have a festival up there every year. I'm like, yeah, he's up here for sure. So he didn't really know much about it. I'm like, dude, they're on your property. So we were walking around his property. I went there because my sister lives up on the border there in Ferndale. And I was telling her, man, this looks like there might be some action up here back in the day. You know, they may have been there in the 80s and maybe moved on, but they might have come inland and then they back out. So my sister, I'm at her house, and the guy's working on their garage, and he had lived there since the 80s. And I'm like, just casual, after he was done pounding some nails, I'm like, hey, have you ever had any Bigfoot sightings? Blah, blah, blah. You know, if you're not asking, you're not getting. You got to ask. Like my favorite book I used to read, Magic of Getting What You Want. You ask and you shall receive. If you're not asking, you're not getting any answers.
Right.
So always keep asking the questions, and you're going to meet these people that just never told anybody because nobody ever asked them. So I asked the guy, I said, you ever had any sightings around here? He says, funny you ask. And I said, yeah, well, what happened? He goes, there was something in the tree and right behind my sister's house. And I had walked around there and said, dude, there's some weird around here. There's a hole in your fence. I don't know who put that hole in your fence, but it's wire, and it doesn't seem like anybody can break the hole down below. And so she was kind of like, you think? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just talked to your neighbor, and he told me that there was something in the tree that screamed at him and scared him so bad that he went in the house and never came out till the morning. But that's all he told me. And so I had done a bunch of research around that area. Mount Baker is loaded, and there's a lot of stories up in Baker, and of guys that lived on farms that chased them off their farms. There's my buddy. So we hadn't seen each other for like 10 years, and we went to grade school together. So he's like, yeah, you got to come out and check out my place. He's got this house, 6 acres. And so I start walking around his property, spend the night, and I see this tree break. I'm like, all the birch are like 12 inches round. The white ones that are all next to each other. There's like 50 of them in this area, and one is snapped at about 10 feet, and it's pointing this way. I go, dude, that's a marker. Why would there just be one? And it was clearly snapped. It was not chopped. Nobody cut it. He's, oh, I never noticed that. And then I go, and your fence post right next to the chicken coop, those green fence posts that you pound into the ground that are pretty sturdy. They're about 5 feet tall.
Yep.
5-6 feet. And then you put your wire fence around it. So he covered his whole property and put it around the whole thing because he's got bears and coyotes and mountain lions around there. So I'm looking at this one fence post by the chicken coop, and it's 6 inches from the top, the whole thing is bent over. No human could bend that. It's impossible. I don't know if a bear could. I mean, it's possible, but if they put both paws on it and leaned on it, but it looked like the hand of a Bigfoot. So I thought that was really unusual. And I'm like, have you had any sightings around here? He goes, nothing I know of. I go, well, you get your cords of wood from this guy down the trail here. I go talk to him. Ask him. And sure enough, he asked him, he says, hey, have you had any Bigfoot sightings? And the guy says, yeah, as a matter of fact, they're up high. And because there's like steep terrain on both sides of his house. I go, dude, they're up there. They're not coming down until they want to come down and check on you. And it's usually at night. And they're very tactical. They're like special forces. You know, people call them the ninjas of the woods. It's what they do. They're good at it. And they've been doing it for thousands of years, for all we know. They've trained each other so they're young on down. They train them young. And so he asked that guy that gives him wood, and the guy said he hasn't, but his friends that hunt have seen them. And then I did some other research up there on stories, and other people have clearly seen them in the woods. So I was like, hey, dude, put some apples up around your property. They love apples. And see what happens. So I'm going to make another trek up there later this summer because I know there's something going on up there. And then there was a sighting of a skinny female that he had seen. So I've been kind of keeping up on him. I'm like, hey, have you seen anything? You know, we talk like every week, we text, and I'm like, have you seen anything? And he goes, dude, I was driving around, and on the bottom of the bridge on one of the rivers, there was this hairy, skinny creature. It looked like a Bigfoot. I go, it's probably a female. They're skinnier. And he goes, man, it wasn't a person. I go, are you sure? He goes, yep. So how crazy is that? Just by keeping him focused on what to look for. And then I started sending him pictures of all these tree breaks and structures that they make. And I go, those structures are for the other families, because they are obviously in groups of 4 to 5, and they know that this is their area. There's some type of communication in those structures that are telling other clans, so we'll just call them clans because pretty much that's what they are, and they're telling them that this is our area, or letting them know that stay out. So I send him all these pictures because he doesn't know much about it. I'm kind of educating him at this point. And I'm like, here's a bunch of pictures. So I send him like 10, 12 pictures. And then he starts sending me back pictures that he had done hikes 4 to 5 miles from his house outside of his 6-acre property that's in the middle of nowhere, sending me these pictures of these structures. I'm like, what? I told you. So I'm like,
oh, wow. That's awesome.
Be careful up there. Yeah. And I just said, dude, they're not going to harm you unless you come in there with your gun. He's got his dogs. I go, wait, if your dogs start whimpering, get out of there, because the dogs know they're not going near that thing. How many times have you heard of dogs that, start whimpering and they've been chasing things their whole life? They're hunting dogs and they just like cower and take off the other way. It's time to leave at that point. And so he is very curious now, but I just tell him to be careful, because you don't know if you could run into a bad one, because people just can disappear. And I'm telling people, if you're going out hunting them and squatching and thinking you're going to find one, you might just disappear. So you better watch it. Be careful, because they know if you're up to no good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can't trick them. Never, ever try to trick. That is like number one, dude. Don't do it.
Yeah. And so it's like now, so there was also this woman that I had done this research on, that I was Googling around, and I was like, how could there not be any Bigfoot caught? I know there has. I know the government covers it up. Everybody says, well, you got no video, you got no this. All the videos are grainy. Well, what if they were making the videos grainy the second they come on YouTube? You ever think of that, dummy? They're not stupid. They don't want this thing to come out of the bag. Just like UFOs, they keep it covered up because it doesn't fit the narrative. And I'm telling you, there was a woman that I discovered that had documents from a deceased colleague because they were medical people, and he wrote several documents. So she found the papers, and I had found this on the internet. So I was reading about it. I was like blown away. I was like, the recovery of specimens. One was hit by lightning in Texas. This guy had gone down and done the whole anatomy on the thing. And it found out that it had been killed by lightning, and they covered it up and obviously did an autopsy, and the rest is history. The other one was held in captivity in the Northwest, most likely Fort Lewis, because there's a lot of stories out of Fort Lewis, and I have met people that, were in the military at Fort Lewis, and there's stories of them being underground in hidden areas. And we'll get into the cave systems that run up and down North America all the way through California. It's called the Bigfoot Highway. They're down in there. They know where every hidden cave is. Most of these disappearances around the country are around these cave systems. You can pull it up on Google yourself and just pull up cave systems of Bigfoot cave systems, and it will give you a whole map of the whole United States. They're all over the East Coast, and they're all over the West Coast and Texas, and that's where if people are disappearing, that's where they're going. And you're never going to find them. And if Bigfoot dies, that's where they're going to die. And again, even if they did die, they're going to get munched up by everything in the forest. And the last thing that eats their bones is the porcupine, right? We've all heard that. So that makes sense. And Lloyd Pye, if you watch his stuff, they've covered up a lot of his stuff. The guy mysteriously died talking about this stuff, and he's gone. So he had a lot of information on Bigfoot, UFOs, whatever. So the one that was in the Northwest, they actually caught it in this guy's documentary that he put together, and it possibly was Fort Lewis. The creature was able to commit mentally because it didn't like being held in a cage. That was what the guy wrote in his documentation. You ever hear that?
Is this a document you found online then? I've never heard of this.
I can't find it anymore. It's
really?
Not on there anymore. I've looked for it.
Oh my goodness, this sounds wild.
Yeah, the woman that found the documents was over on the East Coast. The guy was a anthropologist high up. The government had chose him to do the documentation of the specimens, and he wrote his findings in that paper, and she just happened to find it when he passed away. It was in one of his boxes, and I thought it was really interesting, the one in captivity that was able to mentally eliminate itself. So that's why I think they don't want to put them in. I mean, what are you going to do anyway? You're going to put the thing in a zoo like a gorilla? I mean, the gorillas can about break the window if they wanted to. But the gorillas are, if you ever go see them, like in the San Diego Zoo or other zoos, they really just have this docile attitude. They aren't intelligent enough to figure out how to get out of there, right? Whereas Bigfoot, they know, is intelligent enough to be able to be pissed off and escape or do damage.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's not an option. It's not an option. And, bringing up the fact that they would ever disclose this thing, they'll keep it hidden as long as they can, because I've done some other research, and the camping industry, take a guess. What do you think it is? Money-wise.
Oh, I mean, it's got to be a massive amount.
Billions?
It's probably billions. Yeah, exactly.
$30 billion. $30 billion. I own RVs. You ever drive down the freeway or just go into neighborhoods and there's these lots So where people are storing all their RVs.
Oh, yeah.
They're everywhere.
Oh,
and they
yeah.
never even use them half the time. They use them like 1 week out of the year. It's crazy. And not to mention that all of the parks, the national parks, are owned by guess who? The National Forest Service, which is owned by the government. They don't want to bring up Bigfoot because then nobody will go camping. I'm not jumping in a tent. It's RV or forget it. You got to break down my door. I'm not sleeping in no tent. These guys that are in tents are crazy in the middle of nowhere. Enjoy. You're basically a meal ticket at that point if they're hungry. I'm not saying they're going to eat you, but I'm just saying there's good ones and bad ones, and there may be a small percentage that are like there's a small percentage of humans that just like to kill people for no reason. And I'm just telling you, there's all kinds of different ones. There's not just one species where they go, oh, it didn't look like Patty. How many different humans do you think there is? These people are idiots. How many humans? There's Asian, there's Indian, there's white, there's black. We all look different. There's probably, 20, 30 different species. There's at least 20 different species of Bigfoot. Because the ones down south in Florida, they look like orangutans on all the reports. And funny thing is, I found a map of the Everglades, and they had the skunk ape on there.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yep, it's crazy.
It's on their map.
Yep. It's wild.
And here they are trying to cover it up.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing is, the cover-up is a joke. And all these people that are deniers, I'm just like, dude, the government can do whatever they want. You go shoot one, they're going to be there in 10 minutes. They're going to be there, and they're going to cover it up, and they're going to threaten to put you in prison because you just killed a partial human, and you did it on U.S. Forest Service land. That's why the majority of the sightings are always on U.S. Forest Service land. And if you do anything outside of the box, you're done. You're going away. You will disappear. You will go to prison, and they will keep it at all costs to cover this thing up. Is because, number one, it is camping industry, massive. Forest Service, they shut down the Northwest over a spotted owl. What do you think they're going to do when they say there's 20 different specimens of Bigfoot and they live in family groups, and now you're not cutting anything down in this area? That is huge. And people that say it's not are full of BS. And I'm telling you, I know for a fact. And number three is the most powerful business on planet Earth. Do you know what that is? Religion. And as soon as they start saying that there is something other than a human form that is part human because they've done the research, you want facts? It's real simple. The guy that did the dermal ridges is the number one dermal ridge expert in the world in Texas. The guy, after doing his research of the handprints, the footprints, he says it's impossible to do a fake dermal ridge, what I have witnessed. And in his view, it is 100% these creatures are real.
Jimmy Chilcutt?
Yeah, that right there is direct evidence of fingerprints. They're all different. They're all different.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No fingerprints the same. And that's why there's many different species of these creatures. There's not just like, oh, blackie, one's black and one's brown. There's auburn colored ones. There's ones that have different facial features, because there's ones that, didn't turn out so good. Like we got deformed people. They're going to have deformed creatures. Like the foot that's bent, they can't figure that one out. Why does it have a bent toe? So the native Indians have all talked about this. There's claims of 10 foot, 12 foot. You know what a 12-foot Bigfoot looks like? I just tell you, look up at your basketball hoop, because the top of the backboard is 12 feet. And the width of your doorway is 4 feet. That's how wide they are.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, it's
You're
not
like
crazy, but it's so tall.
dumbfounded.
Yeah, it'll blow you away.
And that's why people are speechless when they see it. They're like,
Right.
I thought it was 8 feet. No, it's 10 feet. And if my brother has done some research on Gigantopithecus, and there's only one Gigantopithecus down here. They know it existed. They don't have a lot of skull recovery, but there is one in the San Diego History Museum that they put together, and it's 9 feet tall, and it's awesome. And you can look it up on the website for Gigantopithecus, and the first pictures they show is the one of the model they built in the San Diego Museum.
Right.
So that is interesting, and it's possible that they're from that, but I think they're more of a crossbreed. And I've always said this from the beginning, that they don't want to be around humans. Humans, all we do is do what? Fight wars, kill one another. There's massive disease. They have probably been hiding in the woods, watching us kill each other from the beginning of time on continents all over the world, because we know they're in every continent. If you listen to Lloyd Pye, he's like, they're all over. They're in every continent. They're all different. The ones in the Himalayas are Yetis. The ones in North America possibly cross the land bridge, and they're that creature. And they're fast. I mean, they can run 40 miles an hour, right? You think a human is about 20 miles an hour. These things are moving at 40 miles an hour. And they're fast. That's why the cover-up, my friend, is it doesn't fit the Darwinian theories. And
it's some wild stuff. It really is. It's some extremely wild stuff. Do you have any thoughts about if, or in your research, did you find where people were having interactions with Bigfoot, but then dealing with other things as well, like strange things in their house, or maybe like alien type encounters?
Yeah. So I've kind of gone over it 1,000 times in my head, and I'm almost possibly through the Bible, and I was raised Christian, Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a practicing Catholic anymore, but I do believe in there's evil spirits, and the fact that there's the bad smell and the sulfur smell, especially. It says in the Bible, if there's sulfur, it's Satan, and that UFOs have that same emitted. The UFOs are kind of interconnected, and if they are, then they're possibly demonic forces. It is possible, so you have to look at that side as well. And I still wanted to get into the Mount St. Helens cover-up, because there was, when the mountain blew, there was the Army Corps of Engineers went in there and they recovered a lot of bodies. And there was several. The story I read that was most believable was these two guys were from north of Seattle, and they were told to go in there and help out with the removal of all these dead Bigfoot. And there was two massive tents when they showed up, and they could see them bringing in Bigfoot to be worked on that had been burnt or injured. And there was stacks of tens of 20 bodies that had all been killed, and they disposed of them, and the whole thing was covered up, and they were carrying them out of there with massive helicopters. And the ones that were worked on were fixed up and sent back into the wild. Did you ever hear about that?
Yeah, this is probably the most emailed topic that I get for this show, and people are always emailing in asking about it. And it's a really interesting topic because I've yet to talk to, I know that potentially there's a person out there still, if this is a real occurrence, that could be a first person witness that could talk about it. But a lot of people, they've read stuff, they've watched stuff about it, but to get a person to come forward and to be like, yeah, I was there, or I talked to a guy about it. That's pretty tough.
Well, the government's good at covering the stuff up.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
But, there could be a possibility that they are demons. I don't, know for sure, but I know that extraterrestrials, especially, you see the grays and they all look the same. I don't think they're actual flesh. I think they're AI. They all look like they're cookie cutter off the press. And
aliens.
Yeah. And that if people say, well, Bigfoot and alien, they're interconnected. When I see why would they want? Oh, they dropped a Bigfoot off when they landed. I'm like, dude, they're not having that stinky thing in their freaking craft. It's impossible. Whether they helped create it, I don't know. Whether they helped create us, I don't know. But I'm convinced that there's a possibility that they are demonic and possibly a demon. I mean, it's very possible. People have said they've asked it to leave their camp in the body and blood of Christ. There's one way to get rid of extraterrestrials and aliens is body and blood of Christ. I denounce you from this house, and the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and whatever it was is gone. And that people have claimed that they've gotten Bigfoot out of their camp that way, and they've also claimed they got him off their property. I can honestly say I thought I was being abducted in the Big Island of Hawaii. It was very scary. And I could see the UFO, whatever it was, right there in the corner of the bedroom. And I jumped out of bed, and body and blood of Christ, denounced it out of here. It closed up and was gone. And then I was in the front room shaking for an hour. And then I remembered what my mom said. She said, love is the most powerful thing on earth. And so I went into the other bedroom where my wife and kid had been sleeping because it was a spread out condo. And I was in a separate room. I went in and laid next to my son and hugged him. And all of a sudden this warm feeling came over me. And I fell asleep and woke up like nothing had happened. But it was the most horrific experience I've ever had. And I don't know if that is part of, the extraterrestrial agenda. And I'm not sure with Bigfoot, but I know that they're flesh and blood and they're out there. And I tell people, be careful what you wish for, because if you're hunting to go see them and just want to get a picture or prove something, you're not proving anything. You're going to end up gone, because there's thousands of people that are gone and they have no trace of them. They don't know where they are, and they just disappeared. So that's pretty scary in my book. I just tell people, be careful. They just want to be left alone if they're out there. I'm sure they're out there. I'm positive, 100%. 100%.
Absolutely. I think our culture is getting to the point where we're starting to realize that fringe science is not exactly fringe science, and things like telepathy could be a real thing, right?
We're not to that level yet. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But it's wild.
I mean, before you go, I wanted to share with you the mounds across America. You can pull that up on on YouTube, and about these giants that were 10 feet, and they were all buried in these mounds, and they say, oh, these were Indian burials. They lived in tents. They couldn't even, you're telling me they built a structure like that? If anything, it was people that had migrated north that were Incas and built all these mounds across America, and they covered it up because they don't want to pay reparations to them. So all these bodies were taken out of there. They were all put in the Smithsonian. And when the scholars back then, this was in the early 1900s, late 1800s, they freaked out. These things were 10 feet tall. And they took them to the Smithsonian. Well, guess what happened? They put them on a barge and took them all out and dumped them in the Atlantic. Do you know why? Because it didn't fit the Darwinian theory. They've already made up their mind what humanity is, and they wrote all the books. And I'm telling you, do some research, people, because there's much more to know.
Oh yeah, I mean this just skims the surface of what is out there, but
and Bigfoot is part of the evolution process. They don't want evolution to be part of anything. As far as we're divine intervention, I mean, I'm convinced of that. We're divine intervention. I mean, anybody that tries to tell me we came from from an ape, I think things evolve. I'm not saying certain Bigfoot possibly evolved, but I'm just telling people that humanity, we're divine intervention because we're smart, we're intelligent. Everything we do is just like amazing. And people say, oh, we got it from the aliens. I go, no. Give humans respect. We work hard. Von Braun failed 100,000 times before he got the rocket right.
There you go.
If the aliens took him off, he would have done it in the first try. I mean, come on. The pyramids were built by the aliens. It took 20 years. They documented it. It took 23 years to build the pyramids. They didn't do it overnight. So give humanity some respect. We're smart. We're very intelligent people. That's my 2 cents.
I love it, Mr. T. Thank you for, coming on, sharing your 50 years of going after Bigfoot all around the West Coast, and I appreciate you coming on and for sharing what you've learned along the way.
Oh, hey, I did forget to throw this in, and I'll be just real quick. When the rock throwing happened at the motorhome on the California highway coast, we came back a year later with my wife and kid in a different motorhome. And as we left the racetrack and we're heading past Monterey, I was going the same way. And it started to get dark, so I pulled over, not in the same area. And so I got out, and it was off to the side of the road, same thing, because it was getting dark. So I started to get the RV set up, and they were inside. I was outside. I got outside, and I heard a freaking wood knock. And it freaked me out. And then I thought I was hearing things, and I heard it again. I jumped in that RV and drove all the way back to Monterey an hour and slept in the parking lot.
Oh my goodness, that's
because
awesome.
of those stories where you hear they know you've already been there.
Mm-hmm.
And that freaked me out. So I did forget to throw that in.
That's wild. That's a cool add-on, though. Man, good stuff. Please keep in touch. It sounds like you're still out and you're talking to people that are having activity. And, if there's any updates, definitely feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I'll email you because I'm going to head up into that area in Lake Henshaw where the guy on the video. Watch it again. It's very interesting. Monsters
Absolutely.
and Mysteries at the border, and the guy is on his property. I'm going up in there and trying to find that guy. I know he's up there, and I know that whole protected of Palomar up by the observatory. They're in there, and they don't let anybody in there. Nobody. Look it up. It's all protected.
Well, guys, if you can help Mr. T out with those quests he's on, put some stuff in the comments and maybe there can be some knowledge sharing back and forth. But thank you so much for coming on the show, Mr. T. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Nice talking to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. Mr. T's incredible experiences have left us with more questions than answers, but one thing's for sure, Bigfoot is out there and he's not alone. So if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe, share it with your friends, and don't forget to leave us a review wherever you listen to this podcast. And if you or someone you know has had a Bigfoot encounter, especially in places like the Olympic Rainforest, Big Sur, or around Mount Rainier, I'd love to hear from you. So email us at bigfootsociety@gmail.com and please share your story. Thanks again for being part of the Bigfoot Society. Until next time, keep your eyes open, trust your gut, and never stop asking what else might be out there, and see you in the woods.